Hello everybody, thanks for joining me today. I'm Jackie and I create mosaics using sea glass. And today I'm going to show you how to make a small sea glass mosaic sailboat. So a lot of times people will look at my sea glass mosaics, especially one the size of this big sailboat here, and they'll say, oh, I couldn't do that. Well, today I'm going to show you a project that you can definitely do because it's small. I'm going to do a sailboat on an 8x10 frame, and it's really an achievable project. It shouldn't take you too long and it doesn't use a whole lot of your sea glass. But it's worth giving it a try just to see how you like this whole sea glass mosaic art thing. So the first thing that you're going to do is gather up all your supplies. So you need a frame. I use recycled frames and windows, but if you want to use a new frame, that's fine too. I just like to recycle old frames and windows. It's kind of part of my shtick. So you get your frame and you get your silicone. I use this is my favorite. It's a quick seal adhesive bath or kitchen and bath adhesive caulk, and any silicone that you can find that dries clear is going to work for you. I've tried a lot of different products and they all work equally as well. But this size of a tube is really easy to work with, so I'd highly recommend that. So take your frame, remove the backing, remove the mat if there is one, and leave the glass in the frame. And then take your silicone and run a bead of silicone all the way around the outside and then let it set before you get started. So go off and do that now if you haven't done that. I've already done that, so my frame is ready to go so we can get started. So the other thing that you're going to need is I have a tray of brown sea glass, a tray of white sea glass. I have a bit more white than brown and green because I need more white for this particular project, and I have a tray of green sea glass. Now this is a lot more sea glass than I'm going to need, but I like to have lots to pick from when I'm doing a project. The other thing that I've done is I've picked out some special pieces that I want to use. So I have some pieces of pottery here and some blue pieces. I don't have a lot of blue sea glass, but I like to put some blue sea glass in every one of my pieces, so I have some of those picked out. I have some pottery pieces with pattern on them and a few different colored pieces. The other thing that you're going to need is I use little sticks. These are barbecue skewers and toothpicks. That's the only thing I use for tools. I use that to poke around at the pieces to make sure that they're in the right place and also to clear off any excess silicone. And then the last thing that you're going to need is some hanging hardware. So I have a couple of hanging hooks and hanging wire so that when my project is finished I can put some hanging hardware on it so I can hang it in the window. So I have all this stuff ready. There's nothing else that I need that isn't sitting right here. Except for, well, you need paper and a pencil to draw a pattern. So I'm all ready to get started. So what I've done is I've drawn a pattern on the piece of paper, and now I'm going to tape that pattern to the back of my frame. So in drawing your pattern, as you can see here, this is a really simple line drawing. So I just have drawn two sails, I've drawn the boat, and I've drawn the horizon line. Now one thing to keep in mind when you draw your horizon line is the horizon line over water is always straight because water doesn't sit on an angle, it sits flat. So make sure that your horizon line is at a 90-degree angle with the side of your frame on both sides, because otherwise your horizon line is going to look out of whack. So that's one tip I would give you on your drawing. Other than that, it doesn't matter what size your sails are, what size your boat is, it's whatever works for you, whatever you prefer. And then the other thing is I've drawn two tiny little sailboats out in the water because I plan to add a little bit more detail in my background by adding a few more small sailboats. So I'm all ready to go. I've got all my supplies, so let's get started. So before taping the pattern onto the back of the frame, I did clean the glass because you want to make sure that it's clean before you get going. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've picked out some of these special pieces of sea glass, And what I usually do is I put the special pieces on first. So I had a couple of spots here where I wanted to put the sailboats. And these are the pieces I had picked out for sailboats. So I'll put those on here, knowing that this is kind of where I want them to be. And then I had picked out some pieces to put on the sail itself. So I find that a sea glass mosaic, especially a small one like this, is a really good way to showcase some of your favorite pieces of sea glass. I often find some really cool pottery shapes, so I was thinking I'd like to put some of those in the sail. In the big sailboat that I have sitting behind me here, I have a really cool red piece, and I have some really neat pieces of pottery and brown pieces that I like to put in the sail. So I was thinking I'd put some of these in here as well. And then I had a tiny little blue piece that I wanted to put at the top of this sail as a little flag flying. And so then what I'm going to do with the rest of it is I'm going to fill it in with brown sea glass. And then I'm going to make the boat brown as well. So all you're going to do is pick out pieces of brown that will fit well together and kind of run along the line of the sail that you've drawn. And you see, if I just find pieces that fit, I can create this shape of the boat in the bottom. And I just follow along the line of the pattern that I've drawn, and I should get a nice boat shape. I love brown sea glass. I find brown is wonderful for creating shapes like this. So I've been playing around with the pieces enough that I'm ready to start gluing the pieces on. So what I do is I just pick up the pieces one at a time, and I put a little bit of the silicone on the back. You'll notice with this particular product, the silicone goes on white, but it dries clear, and then I just put it in place. Push it down. I try to push it down enough so that it's nice and secure, but I don't want to squeeze the silicone out so that you can see it around the edges. So you'll see I'll just go like that. Put each piece on one at a time. So I got the boat all glued on and that one sail, and now I'm just going to finish off this sail. And you can see as you start to surround these really special pieces with the brown sea glass, I think it really showcases some of those special pieces that you have. So there you go. My sailboat is finished. So I'm going to take a little break before I start on the water, because for one thing it allows the silicone to set a little bit so the pieces won't shift in place on me. And for another thing, it's good to take a break. So I finished with all the brown, and my next step is to do the green. Now when I'm doing water, I always start with the horizon line, and I use tiny greens on the horizon line. So I'm going to fill that in before I do the rest of the water. So when you're doing the horizon line, try to keep it really straight. So gluing on small pieces is a bit fussier than gluing on bigger pieces, because it's hard to get it so that there isn't silicone coming out from behind the piece, because you need enough to have it stick. You don't want them falling off later, but you don't want so much that it makes a mess on the glass. So this is where the toothpicks really come in handy to clear off any silicone that seeps out from behind the piece of sea glass. And I'm just going to work on filling in all of this area below the horizon line and inside the rest of the frame with green sea glass. The other thing that I always do with my pieces is I include a little inukshuk, and that's my signature. So I'm going to put on a little inukshuk with some of my brown pieces of sea glass down here in the corner. So there's my signature. You can think about what you'd like to use for a signature. Maybe you just want to write your name on the back, or maybe there's something special about you that you think, oh, I think I need to include that in my piece of art. So because this isn't a very big sea glass mosaic, I'm not using really big sea glass pieces. I'm using mostly small. But I do want to keep in mind that if I use pieces that are a little bit larger down on the horizon, it's going to help give a little bit more distance in the water. Another thing I'd like to point out about creating the water in a sea glass mosaic is that I really prefer to use all different shades of green. If you notice when you're at the beach and you look out on the water, you see all different shades of green in the water depending on how the sun is shining and what's going on at the time out on the water with the wind and everything else. So I really like using all different shades and all different sizes, and it just creates a little bit more interest in the water. I just love this blue piece that I picked out here to feature in the sail. It's the rim of a blue bottle, and you can really see the ridges where the top would have screwed onto a blue bottle at some point. So here we go. Pretty well finished up. I just have one last piece. So there we go. I finished up the water, and so that takes care of the green. So now it's time to take another break. So now the part that I have left to do is to fill in the rest of the piece with white sea glass. Now, with doing the sky, you can take the approach of just randomly placing all the whites, or you could do things in more of a systematic way and try to make some flowing lines with your white. The other thing that I like to do when I'm doing a sky is to include some aqua, because the aqua pieces they just add some real interest to your sky. If all of your sky is just plain white, I think you'll find it's fairly flat. Whereas if you add some aqua pieces, even some of those pale lavenders can be really cool in the sky. The other thing that I like to do is to use some big whites and some small whites just to make it more interesting. So about this stage, hopefully you're thinking, I can do this. But you might decide that you'd like to go bigger than 8 by 10 for your first project. And if you do, what I'd encourage you to do is to maybe include some clouds or a sun in the sky. Sometimes I'll use a bottle bottom or a great big white piece for the middle of a sun, and then I'll have rays of sea glass coming out to make it look like the sky has got the sun shining and lots of interest and everything in the sky. And I'll often make clouds in the sky as well. So I'll use pottery pieces, or I'll use bigger pieces of white to make clouds, or just to add some interest to the sky. But for a piece this size, I find that I want to keep the focal point on the sailboat itself. So I'm not including a sun or any clouds. I'm just going to fill in the sky with white. Just another thing I'll point out, sometimes when I have a gap between a piece that's fairly small, I'll take a smaller piece of sea glass, and instead of putting it in like that, I'll turn it on end, and I'll put the silicone on the one side of it and then put it in on end so it sticks up. It's a little bit fussier to put in, but I do find it fills in some of those spots, and it also adds a little bit more interest in your sky. So to help emphasize the crisp line of the sail, I'm being careful to pick out pieces that have straight edges to put alongside of the sail. And so I have a strip of aqua going through the sky on this side, and I also have a strip going through on this side. Just adds a little bit more interest to my sky. And so there you have it. It is a sea glass mosaic sailboat. Finished. So now all I have left to do is to let the silicone set for a couple of days, and then I'll add the hanging hardware and I'll hang it in a window and enjoy. As the sun shines through these beautiful pieces of sea glass, it'll really bring it to life. So thanks for joining me today and learning how to make this sea glass mosaic sailboat. And if you have the skills to make this one, you would have the skills to make one this big as well. It'll take you more time and it'll use a bit more sea glass, but when you make something on a larger scale, you can add a lot more detail, which is really interesting. And also I find with the bigger pieces you get a much more impressive mosaic effect. So it's well worth the time and effort to do it. Not to mention how enjoyable it is to make sea glass mosaics, which hopefully after you make this one you will discover.